So welcome everybody to our first SATAA webinar for 2020. It's great to see some new faces. And welcome to Layo Seriki. You've been quite active in SATAA in the past. It was sad to see you go. And glad that you're still actively involved in TA now with TIFF. So we look forward to hearing what you're going to present to us. Welcome.
Thank you, Alex. It's great to see you all here. And I was just saying to Alex earlier, this is my very first webinar that I'm facilitating. So I've been part of many webinars as a participant, but actually facilitating this feels a bit strange because I'm not in the same room with you all. And at the same time, if I can see challenged with the technology at the moment because I'm in someone else's office because we have load shedding at home, so no electricity. So I'm here and the internet connection seems a little bit unstable. So I ask you to please bear with me and be patient. And I'm just hoping and praying that this all works. Yeah, Alex has said my name. I'm Layo Seriki. And I'm not gone from the SATAA. I'm still very much a member of the SATAA and happy to be so and remain so. I still work with TA a lot in my work with organizations and individuals. So I'm a consultant and a coach, working mostly with leaders in diverse environments. And I'm really always interested and intrigued about how people get along together well, when they get along together well, and what actually makes that work. When does it work? When does it not work? So looking at the effectiveness of interpersonal communication and behavior is one of my passion points, I would say. And that's where functional fluency comes in, this model that I'm going to introduce you to today. I know that some of you know the model quite well. Alex, Andrew, and Sharon have all trained in functional fluency, even if it's a while ago. Kirsty, you know a little bit, I think. The other two you've said not so much, so it's an introduction. And I think for all of us, it'll be a journey together. Also looking at how does that fit with other TA concepts, especially the concept of okayness. So looking at the windows of the world or the OK Corral, how does the functional fluency model fit in with that? So this will be experiential, this workshop, 2 hours that we have together. And I'd like to ask you to please share as much as you feel comfortable. The sharing is important because we all learn from each other and grow from our personal experiences and sharing those. And at the same time, it's important that we keep ourselves safe and really only share what we're comfortable to share. And the recording is on, I think, when we're all together in a big group. And when we split up into smaller groups in between, I think that doesn't get recorded. Is that correct, Alex?
That's right.
Okay, great. So before we dive into what functional fluency is, I'd also like to briefly introduce the person who gave birth to functional fluency as a concept, a model, and then also TIFF, the online tool, and that is Susanna Temple. She is now in her early 80s. She was a teacher in England who started this work in the 1990s, in the early 1990s, I think, because she recognized a need, the awareness and effectiveness of educators in their interactions with each other and with the children that they were teaching, with the parents of these children. She saw a lot going, well, not ideally, you could say, and was looking for a way to remedy that. And that's what led her into this research, which then culminated in the functional fluency model and TIFF, an online tool. And Susanna is now thrilled that her work has grown out of that, still very active in schools, but also grown into completely different contexts and is growing and being used in different contexts worldwide now. So it's really exciting to be part of that, of the growth and spread of functional fluency, because I really think it helps people get along together better. Have you got any questions before I start sharing my screen with a bit of a presentation that I have to start with? Nope. Okay, then I will share my screen and go into the presentation. There. Okay, so we've gone into who's here and what we'd like to get out of the 2 hours. Well, a little bit. What I understood was that you'd all like to get either a refresher or a bit of an idea what this is about. Is there anything anyone wants to add to that? Okay, then we'll just continue with what is functional fluency actually. So in the words of Susanna Temple, it's the natural way that human beings get along together well. It's the way that we use all those positive, flexible ways of responding to each other that help us communicate well. So that shows already it's not rocket science. It's actually what people already do all the time. It's what we're doing when our communication with other people feels good, when our interaction with others feels right. And and there's kind of an okay feeling about it. I'm okay and the other person's okay. And it's fun to be together and to be interacting with one another. And it's a name for our social responsibility in the sense of really being able to respond consciously as opposed to reacting automatically. So when people become functionally fluent, they communicate more effectively and usually find relationships more satisfying and fulfilling and successful. They learn how to choose responses that help things turn out well instead of repeating over and over again those old automatic reactions that sometimes make things worse. And they find that they save a lot of time, energy, and stress. Functional fluency is a model that comes from TA, and as you all know, an underlying assumption of TA is that people are intrinsically okay as human beings. They are valuable as the people they are, and always do the best that they can with the awareness, the knowledge, the skills, the information, and the tools that they have at that particular point in time. Would you agree with that? Okay, I see nods. And yes, so do I. I do the best that I can in all areas of my life. And as a human being, sometimes I get into situations that I'm not so happy about. I get stuck, and then sometimes I find myself looking through a window out of which I don't see myself as okay, or I don't see the other people as okay, and can't sort of see a way out of that. And this is where the link to those life positions or those windows of the world comes in. Functional fluency is about behaving from a position of I'm okay, you're okay, as much of the time as possible, and also about recognizing when we're behaving in a not so effective way and finding alternatives to that behavior. So we're training our ability to respond instead of react, because a lot of our behavior is actually habitual. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment so that we can do a little exercise, a little experiment together. Could you all fold your arms? Okay, so that seemed pretty quick and easy. Is that easy? Okay, then unfold your arms again. Okay, and now fold your arms again, but the other way, not the way you folded them the first time, but the opposite way. Now that took a little bit more thinking, didn't it? Who found the second one just as easy as the first? No one? Okay. Yeah. So the second one we had to think about, and that's just like we have to think about new alternative ways of behaving. If the old ones aren't leading us to really matter which way we're folding our arms. Okay, maybe there's something about balance in the body and being able to use both sides equally that could be healthy for us. In other behaviors, just doing the same thing all the time that we've been used to can become a lot more destructive. And often we don't know a way out of it. So like for me, folding my arms the other way is actually really difficult. I have to sort of think about, okay, where was the hand? Where do I have to put the other hand now? And it's really tricky. And I guess if I would practice that every day, it wouldn't be so difficult anymore. And I would be able to do it just as easily as the first way around. So we need to become mindful about what's really happening. What are we doing? What are the consequences of what we're doing? And which behaviors that we used to are working for us and which ones aren't. And that's where functional fluency as a model comes in really useful, because it provides us with a map or a menu of different possible, and I'll show you this model by step, building it up, and we can look with that at where we find more or less okay. So I'll go back to the screen sharing. Where am I? Here again. Okay. Oops. Can you all see my screen with the 3 categories of human functioning? Okay, perfect. So the functional fluency model has these 3 levels, and we're at the first of them now, which is the 3 basic categories of human social behavior. So there are 3 ways in which we use energy as human beings when we behave day to day. And the first one, the first category, is about growing up. So it's about using energy on our own behalf to grow into ourselves, to start becoming ourselves, to learn to express ourselves in our own way throughout life. So that's at the bottom there with the green little happy man. The second category is about surviving, actually. We grow up, then we survive. We need to survive. And in order to survive, we need to use energy inside of ourselves to stay in touch with the here and now, to really make sense of what is happening outside of us, ourselves, inside of ourselves, to look at possible consequences in order to make really informed, clear decisions on what to do next, which are based on our knowledge of the here and now. And the third category of behavior at the top is about then starting to, well, grow other people, starting to take responsibility on a social level and using energy on behalf of others so that others can grow up. And when I'm in charge, I'm taking responsibility for people at work in the work context, for people at home as a mother, for example, and also for myself. So the top category there is about using energy on behalf of others, but at the same time, we're still including ourselves. We're not forgetting about ourselves in that context, because we also need to take social responsibility for ourselves there. And these 3 build on each other, but we use all of them all the time. So it's not that first the one, then the other in our day-to-day behavior. They're all there and we mix them. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Well, it's more an observation. I see under reality assessment, it says moment by moment. And I'm just wondering how that kind of time frame is different in reality assessment compared to the other 2 categories.
Okay. So the reality assessment is really looking at what is going on now. and now is this particular moment in time. And I've just said that, and I'm already at a next moment in time. So it's really looking at the here and now reality of what's going on. The other two categories, it's more to do with, okay, how do I express myself? That also happens in the here and now, but I can also be thinking about tomorrow, and I'm drawing on yesterday as experience. And social responsibility as well also takes into account experiences from the past and the future. The difference to the internal reality assessment is that focuses really more on the present moment. And it's difficult to, when you say moment by moment, thanks for picking that up, Alex, we can't really completely isolate that one moment. But it's important as we're doing that reality assessment not to get too distracted by what happened 5 years ago, what happened to us as a child, what we learned in the past, but to really focus on what is the here and now reality of what's going on, because that's the information that is important for the decisions that we need to make now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Okay, so then I'll explain a little exercise. Yes.
Sorry. So from what I gather is you mentioned that it's all about in here and now. Mm-hmm. However, we do understand that there are influences of the past experiences. Mm-hmm. You mentioned maybe childhood or even the other behaviors that has accumulated over a period of time. Yes. That definitely has an influence. So does this fall under, how would that really come into this whole gamut of things? I'm not quite understanding when we say only here and now versus the thing from the past.
Okay, so when we're doing that reality assessment bit, so in that category, we're really collecting information for what may be important for the decisions that we're making about our behavior at this moment in time, today. And experiences from the past may come into that as information, but the important thing there is to be able to differentiate what influenced your behavior in the past, how did that go, and how is that different, that situation from the past, how is that different to the situation that you're sitting in right now, so that you don't get sucked into that automated reaction of, okay, I've always done it this way, so I do it that way again. But you can actually compare, how similar is the situation and how different, and do the differences lead to different responses that make more sense for this situation than the responses that you had in the past?
Sure.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that does. In a way, I also gather from what you shared is that inviting the person to move from either the child behavior or a parent ego state behavior into an adult to see exactly what is in here and now, and trying to see the differences, and also if there is any similarity, then how one can make a different decision accordingly, if necessary.
Exactly. So you mentioned the ego state model, and that is exactly what this functional fluency model is derived from. It comes from that ego state model. So it's really about being in that adult ego state and using that. The difference is that in this functional fluency model, we're really focusing on behaviors to look at what are effective behaviors, what are less effective behaviors. And the behaviors are more to do with the present and the future and what there actually makes sense. But of course, the information that we're drawing on can be from past experiences, which, yeah, could come from the child ego state or the parent ego state, which is all linked with the past and past experiences. Yeah, and I think as we build this up step by step, you'll get a better understanding of what the difference is and how you can really use this. Any other questions or comments so far? Okay, great. Then I will share my screen again to show you a little exercise that I'd like to do, or a question that I'd like to ask you to discuss when you go into groups. And when we've all looked at this and it's clear, then Alex will sort you into groups, and I think it'll be good to go into pairs. And Alex, you can do that completely randomly. So I'll show the screen again. This works. Sorry, I'm still a bit clumsy at this whole screen sharing business. That's the big one. Okay, here's the exercise. And the task is to think of a time that you handled a tricky situation really, really well. You were effective at that time, and you really loved the outcomes that you got. The outcomes that you got from the way you behaved at that time benefited you and benefited the other people who were involved. And then also think about what pleases you most about your behavior in that situation. What did you do really well? And is that somehow linked to those three categories that we looked at just now? Okay. Should I leave this on? Does anyone need to take notes before you go into groups? And I would say 10 minutes, so that if you're in pairs, you have 5 minutes each to share, and then we come back.
I just want to check, you said 10 minutes, Layo.
Okay. Questions? Ready?
I just want to check, did you say 10 minutes?
Alex, it seems like Lara might be having connectivity issues again.
Okay.
She did say 10 minutes total.
Good. Okay.
It's like everyone's back. Great. Good to see you all back again. And I'm very curious to hear what happened in these little breakaway sessions. What came up for you? What was interesting, insightful, anything that you groups would like to share?
I'd like to share. It was interesting for me that the behavior, which is really what we're focusing on, is a result of something that's changed internally, in terms of, how you see yourself, how you see the situation, what you were saying about being focused on the here and now, that something internal changed before the actual external behavior changed.
Right. Okay. Okay. Interesting. And was that the case for both of you in the group? Is that something an insight that you arrived at together?
No, that was just my insight that I got afterwards.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, interesting. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Julie?
You're muted, Julie.
Muted.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, that was a really interesting experience in that, I guess, for myself and for Kirsty, there was a sense of what was coming up in the other person was a bit overwhelming, and we weren't expecting it. A sense that an unconscious default setting arrived, and then an awareness of that unconscious default setting, and then a noticing that actually that was going to be the most inappropriate way to go forward. Possibly cement old ways of being in this relationship, and then a choice to actually I need to move somewhere else inside of me that really affirms the okayness in the other person and the okayness in me. And I guess for myself, it was about, I don't know how this is going to unfold. I moved into absolutely not knowing, because this was, now I have to choose a different way of relating. And how, moment by moment, with moving very differently, but affirming, not sure, but I'm sure that there will be something that might be different for both of us, and it really could work better. Something quite exciting shifted, and stage shifted after a week, and both people, myself and the other person, moved into more okayness. Well, adult here now, taking responsibility. So it was good to reflect. It was a really useful exercise. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And it's so intriguing to see how already, just by asking what was different from the norm, what was different from the automatic pattern, and then use that knowing more and more going forward. So really becoming aware of what's happening helps you to grow those effective behaviors. Thank you. Anyone else?
Layo, so something that I just made a connection now while hearing the feedbacks now is what I noticed in my example was being highly aware of what my old patterns were, and the old patterns of being like in driver behavior. So when I'm stressed and going into my ineffective behaviors. But then something that I've been holding for myself quite a lot recently is my current, like this kind of ability to step back and say, my current self wants to do this, but my future self wants me to do something else now. So kind of having a bit of that kind of awareness and challenging myself in the moment to lean into the maybe the unknown or the discomfort, but then trusting it as well. So noticing that out of the example it was quite, I mean, the end result was distinctly different behavior, and really energizing.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Andrew. And what you said there, I think, is really important. The sort of how you were being between your former self and your future self. You were in your here and now self, ready to try stuff out, to experiment, to just, it's a very, this focus on behavior is very attached to being active. We need to be active to step into explorations, into experimenting and trying things. Because yes, it starts from a reflecting place, but from that reflection, we always move into action, which is then behavior. And that is in your here and now space between the past and the future. Okay. If not, then I will share my screen again, go to that next scene, quite a bit of how you do behave in positive, effective ways. Just looking for that proper screen again. Here it is. I've got it. No, got to go one back. No. Other way. This way. This is the one I want. So the 5 elements to survive and thrive is that next step of the functional fluency model, at which the 3 categories that we saw before are split up on the social responsibility level into guiding and directing on the one hand and looking after people on the other side. So it's about being in control and taking care of people. And on the self-expression side, at the bottom there, it's on the one hand about expressing ourselves in relationship with other people. So that's the relating to others side. And on the other hand, it's being in our own unique way. We each need to find our own unique way of showing up in our elements, name what we do with our and they are probably also what you started looking. So I think what I'd like to do is, instead of going back into groups to look at how you use these 5 elements in those positive examples, we're a small enough group, we can stay in here and do that together, so that I also get a sense of what actually came up there. So if you each want to take a moment and think about how you use those 5 modes of, no, not those 5 modes, those 5 elements of behavior, with the reality assessment staying one in the middle and not being split up. And what you could do is, if you've got a piece of paper and a pencil or something, you could draw how much of which did you use in that example? How that reality, and how much taking care of, how much guiding and directing, how much self-expression in relation with others, and how much just doing your own thing your own way did you have there?
Layo, can you put that slide back up, please?
Should I put the chart back up? Yes.
Yeah.
That's, yeah. There. Why is it not showing? Here. Okay, now we've got it. One. This one.
Yeah.
Just sort of go with your hunch as to, in that really positive situation, how were they distributed? And then when you've done that, you can also reflect about, do you think that's your typical distribution of how you use these 5 elements? Or would your typical pie chart of how you use these elements during a normal average day, would that look different? And if it would look different, how?
This is fascinating. When I look at this, what comes to mind is Karen Pratt's work with a colleague. And the social responsibility, I'm looking at guiding and directing, looks like the controlling parent, and the looking after people as the nurturing parent.
Yes.
You've got the A, and then relating to others a little bit, I don't know, adaptive child, natural child. I don't know if that resonates with anybody. And my default setting is nurturing parent, looking after.
Okay. Yes. Okay, so that's something that you're very good at.
Yeah, but I can tend to, in that way, invoke a bit too much of the child in the other. A sense, and sometimes, look, it's necessary, especially if a mother-child relationship, but as they grow up, a sense that what I noticed was that I moved from looking for, so it was my son, an interaction with my son who's now 23,
Okay.
not 13.
I'm going to stop sharing the screen so that we can all see each other properly.
Okay. And that my natural, because he's had a traumatized, he's a bit traumatized, that a sense that the default setting was looking after, and now at his age of 23, I chose to not go in there, but to go into actually and a sense of I'm not too sure what's going to happen, but I do believe you have the resources at your disposal. And
yes,
I kind of I expressed a bit more of myself than I usually do. I didn't squash myself and look after him. In the reality checking, I had to make more space for myself, and oh my goodness, I can't go back there.
Okay.
So it was really interesting.
Yeah, thank you. So that sounds as if you looked a bit more balanced, like more, they were kind of more the same size, those pieces, than in the default.
There we go.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. So you were combining them, and yes, it did remind you again of the ego state model, which is sure, because that is where it comes from. And I think that the difference is really that yes, we are behaving and acting from those ego states, from those positions, but in this model, we don't stay with the position. So I'm in this position, and in this position I can only do this, but we then focus on the doing, and what difference does the doing make. And I think if we change the doing into another, so that the models are very, very strongly linked.
Thank you.
Yeah. What came up for the others? What do your pie charts look like and the differences? Yes, Andrew.
So I noticed if I look at my example, that noticing that I was kind of at the precipice of going in down what was the old way of being versus trying out something new, and looking at if I kind of share my percentage of energy across these five elements. And what I notice in particular is that guiding and directing being very low, in fact, potentially even zero in the old one. But then in the new one, actually seeing quite a nice, more balanced distribution. So I think something that I recognize is that the accounting or the reality assessment was pretty much equal, like old and new. But it was the distribution of the other parts that needed to be more balanced out. So boosting my guiding and directing, and reducing maybe the relating to others, and rather adding some of that energy to the guiding, directing, and a bit more of doing my own thing. So it was interesting to see how it, like, I don't know, like shook the sands and see how it shifted differently.
Yes, interesting. And again, what your insight in the way that you liked. Yeah.
Sorry, Larry, you broke up a bit, so I didn't quite hear what you were saying at the end there.
2 or 3 and none of the others. Actually had a lot of 2 or 3 and none. Hello? Does everyone hear me?
Hi. Okay, now it seems like you're back now.
Andrew, okay. Did my response come across?
No, just got like bits of sound every now and then.
It might be useful to try turning your video off. Maybe the bandwidth would cope better, and then we'd be able
I'll
to hear you.
try that. How do we do that? Stop video. Okay. Is that working? Okay, now my video is off. Can everyone still hear me?
Much better.
Now you're coming through clearly.
Oh, good. I'm glad. And so what I was saying is that also in your insight, Andrew, 6 of the 5 elements was more balanced. You used some of each of the elements as opposed to just using a lot of 2 or correct?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome back.
I need to press continue. Okay, great, got it. Yeah, welcome back everyone. And like I just said, I'm so glad to be sitting in my own office at home, feeling a lot more safe and secure somehow, and excited to be continuing this with you. And I've been really thinking about, when did we start this webinar? And that was 2 weeks ago. And it felt to me this morning as if, gosh, really, only 2 weeks? Because it feels like the whole world has changed in that time. And I thought we could start just by all reflecting for a moment on what were you able to take with you from what we discussed in the somewhat difficult challenged webinar 2 weeks ago. What were you able to take with you into this time of change from our session together? If anything, I'm curious. Andrew.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I hadn't specifically been thinking through a lens of functional fluency.
Mm-hmm.
But when I think about how I've experienced the past 2 weeks, like this strong invitation to fall outside of the useful ways of being, and go into varying versions of, I don't know, distress, whether it be being critical or panicky, or just becoming, actually I've noticed myself being at times being quite childish in the way of being lost and unsure. And it's been interesting kind of noticing that sensation, but at often being able to hold it at arm's length, and kind of bring myself back into the here and now and say, okay, well, what needs to be done? What is my need? What is the need of others around me? And engage with that. And that, which is what's been really nice in reflection, is seeing a mixture of sort of self-coaching through that, but a significant amount of reaching out to others, and that connectivity and reassurance of connecting with others.
Yeah. Okay, great, thank you. And while you were sort of on that journey, where did you find yourself going in the OK Corral?
I think there was a lot of adults, and actually, so that's an interesting question. A lot of adults, and then quite a bit of free childs, I suppose.
So when you're looking through the windows of the world.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just talking. I got confused about models for a second.
That's okay. They're all connected anyway.
Okay, Carol. Yeah. So probably my strongest pull is to go into I'm not okay centered something. So at times going into the I'm not okay, you're not okay, which is really unpleasant. And then at other time, I mean, like really like dipping toes in. And I think at this kind of heightened sense of needing something to happen, going like, okay, that's really uncomfortable. I really don't need to be there. I really want to get back into my okay space.
Yeah.
So that's been quite interesting about the timeline of dipping toes into the different places.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, thanks Andrew for sharing. Anyone else?
Yeah, something that's really stood out for me is yesterday there's an interview on the radio about the coronavirus with our Minister of Health. And I was so impressed with his approach to not only the interviewer but to the people who called in to ask him questions. And I think it was a great example of being functionally fluent, about being able to, even when maybe being pressed into a corner. So I'll give you an example. He was asked a lot of questions which he couldn't answer. And I think often leadership, maybe even particularly political leadership, when that happens, they can go off on tangents or avoid the question, or perhaps even become quite dominating. And that didn't happen. It was really a balanced response in saying, there's some questions that we can't answer. We'll have to see what happens. And at the same time being really respectful, and he managed, I think through his tone of voice and through the language he was using, to maintain quite a high rapport very quickly with people calling in. So this isn't necessarily something that I've had on my mind since the last webinar, but it's just reflecting on something that stood out for me through the functional fluency lens.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's really interesting. Thanks. Kirsty and Pooja, you both thinking?
I was trying to gauge if Pooja was reaching or not. I'll go. Yeah, I've been staying at home for the last 10 days or so anyway, so I'm feeling like not much has changed for me, except that now I have a completely stocked pantry so that I don't have to leave the house for the next 3 weeks. I've never had so much food in my house before at one time. Usually we go shopping every couple of days, so it's quite a thing. I'm just looking at my notes from last time, and the phrase that stands out for me is social responsibility. Breaking up the word responsibility. That really tickled me last time. And I think what's coming to mind for me is the way that I am choosing to show up in my business right now during this period of time, because I mean, as soon as everything happened the last week or two, new clients cancelled because now they need the money. And old clients had kind of just finished up. So now I'm literally sitting in no man's land and thinking, what am I going to do? So trying to get creative in what I can put out there to support people and help them. So I'm just looking at that word, social responsibility. How can I be there for people and support them because I know that I'm equipped to do so? And at the same time, how can I bring in some income and look after myself and find a balance between that? So the reality assessment, I think, was definitely part of that. And the self-expression piece, it's so interesting because when you think about how Giles Barrow does this, is it CAP? He puts child on top.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where I was going with that, but it feels like the self-expression piece actually, like you would think reality assessment ties it all together, but I feel like self-expression ties it all together for me. Expressing my assessment of reality, expressing my assessment of reality and expressing my sense of social responsibility. Yeah. So I think it's trying to figure that out and navigate it, and being okay with it being a bit messy at the moment. And like, I know we're now officially going to be in lockdown for 21 days, but I feel like it's going to be longer than that. It's my personal belief. So I just feel like this is now almost hitting a reset button and choosing a new way to be, and just figuring that out.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for sharing those thoughts. I think they're so relevant, and especially that piece about the self-expression coming up so strongly. I've seen that in myself, and I've seen that in other colleagues as well, how all of a sudden there are new ideas bubbling, and everyone's wanting to write something and feeling this urge to connect, but also to express what one is thinking and feeling, and that is all leading to new products coming out, so to innovation, which is really, really interesting to witness both internally and observe from the outside. So I'm curious to see where this is going. And yes, curiosity also comes into that. And linking the reality assessment to the self-expression part seems to be very important in these days that we're living in. Yeah, thanks, Kirsty. Yeah, Pooja, from your side of the world, what's happening with you?
So in my case, the situation is such that I am not in my home country. So I'm away in a different country. And so, and the situation is such now that there's no way I can go back. And there is, because of all the lockdowns of national borders, everything. So it's kind of, the whole aspect of the reality assessment, just being in the moment, just being there at this moment, that has started becoming much more stronger. So just being there in the moment, seeing what is essential at this moment. And I do have the sense of practice of meditation has gone up considerably, and it's much more disciplined, and that's what is helping me stay sane at this moment. And when I say this, it's what is happening is also that there are a lot of thoughts, a lot of emotions that's coming out, and then I realized that when Kirsty was sharing about from the PAC model, right? So the ego states, that's when I started seeing the connection building up, and how each time trying to just be there, just pull ourselves together to just be as an integrated adult, whereas there are moments when you're not able to be so. Like what you shared, Andrew, about, there are moments when just going into different ego states, and so just being trying to be in the moment to see what can be done best, because the thought that we're also staying with is that each one of us are in different cities, different places in different cities, and how we can be there for each other in this moment, because I guess isolation in general can be a very overwhelming term. So how to deal with it? Thank you.
Thank you, Pooja, for sharing that. And I think something that's really coming up for me as you're speaking is also that piece of expressing ourselves, not just the part of doing our own thing our own way, but expressing ourselves in connection with others. So the cooperation part comes into that, the expressing ourselves in social contexts, and realizing that we can still do that even if we're not physically together. And that will be hugely important in these days that we're living in as well. It already is. So just being able to have a webinar like this and see you all, even if some of you are very far away, is really, yeah, it's healing and it's reassuring at the same time. Okay, thank you, everyone. I think we've bonded, we've connected, and it's time to dive in again to look at what have we actually covered last time, what was the theory, where are we, to build on that, and then take it into some more connection and some more reflection. So I will share my screen if I can find that thing again. There we go. Share screen, this one, share. Good. You should all be able to see my screen. Ah, this is the small one. Just check here. Can you see that one? Yes. Can you see the 5 elements to survive and thrive?
Yeah, I got that.
Yes. Okay, cool. So, what we did last week, 2 weeks ago, was we looked at, going back here quickly, we looked at the 3 categories of human function. So we met the functional fluency model as the art and skill of interpersonal effectiveness. And then we met those 3 categories of human functioning and did a bit of reflection about when we're using energy on behalf of others, when are we using energy on our own behalf, and when are we using energy internally to stay in touch with the here and now. Then we met the 5 elements to survive and thrive, and you've explored how you've used them in handling a tricky situation. And that was, I think, the point when we had to stop because the discussions weren't working. We couldn't hear each other, you couldn't hear me, and we had to sort of take a break in the middle of that reflection, which has been interesting because it's led us to where we are now today. And then before we stopped, I had already asked you to park judgment for a moment and just look at what you do and when you use the 5 elements, but not really looking at good or bad. I think now, at this point, it's a good point to pick up this exploration again by looking a bit closer at those elements. And now we can also let some evaluation or judgment come back in. So we can use these elements of guiding and directing, looking after people, assessing our reality, and expressing ourselves with others and on our own in more or less effective ways. And that is what leads us to the full functional fluency model with the 9 modes of behavior that you see here. At the heart of the functional fluency model lies accounting. That's the big golden blob in the middle there. It's about really tuning in. So being active internally, going inside and making sense of what's going on, tuning in to what we're feeling, noticing things that are happening around us, realizing how things are connected. It's also about staying grounded as we assess those facts and consider consequences. And for all of this, we need a high level of awareness and a high level of logical thinking skills. So it's head and heart really working together when we're doing accounting. And from doing this accounting, we can then choose how to respond. We can move upwards towards guiding and directing, and we can use structuring mode to give support and inspiration. We can make agreements. We set goals when we're doing that. We say when enough is enough. We stick to clear limits. We offer challenges. We focus on what's going well. And that's the key there, I think, that we're focusing on what is going well and we're building on that. We can also move to the right-hand side of that and choose nurturing mode, which is the effective part of looking after people. And when we're doing this, we're giving kindness and understanding to people. We're available, we give time and attention, we can listen with empathy, we can show people that we accept them as who they are, we can offer warmth and appreciation, and we can attempt to understand. We can also use, of course, the self-expression elements. We look at the relating to others, we can choose cooperative mode for sharing warmth and assertiveness. We offer friendliness. We share things with others. We listen with respect. We're willing to give and take. We can stand up for ourselves, and we can consider the other's point of view. So for me, the cooperative mode is really about being friendly and assertive at the same time, which sometimes people think is contradictory, but it's actually not. When you can combine those two, it's so powerful. And we can choose the spontaneous mode, which is the effective part of doing my own thing my own way. And we use those responses to share our liveliness and creativity. You can really let your unique energy come through there. We can be open about how we feel, be willing to have a go with something that's new. We can use our imagination, we can express our ideas, and I love this part, we can enjoy playfulness our own way. So the child part that Kirsty mentioned really comes in here again, that it's okay to play and see what comes out of that playfulness. And of course, events that occur can trigger us into using less effective ways of behaving. So if we're back at the top again and we're trying to control in a destructive way, we can be disempowering through force and focusing on the negative. And in doing this, we undermine people's self-esteem through criticism, put-downs, threats, warnings, or punishments for mistakes. And many people realize that, oh, this sounds horrible, feels horrible, and we may want to be seen as nice, rather, and move into the looking after people, instead slipping into marshmallowing mode. And this is about the soft, hidden harmfulness of negative care or too much care of the wrong sort. It's reacting with undue sympathy, it's smothering people, it's overindulgence, it's just, trying to help where help was actually not asked for or needed. So it's very much about confusing wants and needs. Yeah. So we can see that where structuring was effective, dominating was ineffective. Where nurturing was effective, where we recognized those needs that people have and we're able to cater for them, overdoing it makes us exhibit marshmallowing behaviors and we're ineffective or less effective again. Same patterns can happen when we're looking at the self-expression side of things again. We may use compliant resistant mode as we're relating to other people, reacting either by giving in, using lots of sorries to appease people, saying yes just so that we don't rock the boat, even if we don't really agree with what they've decided. Or we may react by resisting aggressively or with passivity. And these two are together because they're quite similar patterns of behavior, even if they sound contradictory. The one is saying yes for the sake of saying yes, the other is no for the sake of saying no. Both coming from reactions that we've learned sometime in the past that helped us get through difficulties and helped us be somehow accepted and seen. And they become automatic reactions that we think we're using, or we're not really thinking, that we're instinctively using to survive, while we are shutting down our own thought and reflection processes, because we haven't really thought about why we're saying yes or no. We haven't thought about why we're giving in or resisting something. It's all about something that hasn't gone through the accounting process, which is in the middle there. Or we may think, well, expressing our feelings, whoa, I can do that, and I get onto the table and throw a tantrum and throw things because I'm so frustrated. It's immature mode. Using immature mode behaviors is about reacting childishly, on impulse, in a self-centered way, without thought for the consequences. And then this expression of self is no longer constructive and is no longer effective, and does not lead to us or anyone else benefiting. So the central question that Susanna Temple always reminds us of when we're using this model is, do I and others benefit? That's really what it's about. So when we're thinking about which behaviors to use and we're making a decision from accounting mode and using accounting mode behaviors, we're looking at answering that question, do I and others benefit? And if I don't benefit and others don't benefit either, well, maybe I should continue my search and find something that does lead to benefit. I will stop the sharing. Oops, there we go, so I can see you all again. It's really strange sometimes for me talking into this screen with my own slide, and I can't see you. I saw you a little bit, but in very small pictures. What came up while you saw that? Does it resonate with you? Does it remind you of anything? What's coming up? Andrew? Yeah.
There were three things that you said that made some pennies drop for me, which was when you were talking about relating to others, and when you're talking about the cooperative mode, you described it initially as this is where warmth is, and I kind of I hadn't placed it there before, and I without quite articulating the question, I did have a wondering about where is warmth, and then as soon as you said that, I had this image of seeing a past colleague online on a Zoom thing where their small child came and just gave them a great big hug, and and like it just embodied warmth. I was thinking, okay, I can see now where it's a child coming from a child place. The other thing that you said, also in the relating to others, but with the compliant resistant, when you said yes for the sake of yes or no for the sake of no, I think that the no for the sake of no was the first time I've kind of captured that. I've often struggled to make sense of that seeming dichotomy of the compliant and the resistant under one mode. And then the last thing that rang for me was using negative modes. They haven't gone through the accounting mode first.
Yeah.
So those are the three things that really struck me now.
Brilliant summary, Andrew. Thank you. Any other thoughts or reflections? And not everyone has to say something. I'm just just checking. We need something at this point.
It's funny because Andrew pretty much summed up exactly what I had written down, was the no for the sake of no and the yes for the sake of yes. I think just the way you phrased that, it really encapsulates it, and that they haven't accounted yet, they haven't taken stock. is interesting to me because, you know, we talk a lot about people being on autopilot or being in their script or just using their default behavior or ways of being. And I guess the word accounting kind of sums up how it's almost awareness.
Yes.
You put another A in there.
Yes.
It's having awareness, and it's making a choice of going, how do I want to be in state?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So it's being, yes, exactly, Kirsty. It's really about being aware. It's about being alert. It's about being able to ground at the same time. And it's about then connecting those dots between everything that's happening.
Yeah, and really being intentional, I think, because that's a big theme for me at the moment with my clients and work is about being intentional. So I quite like how it all fits together.
Yeah. Thank you, Kirsty. Does anyone else want?
Yeah.
Yes.
What comes up for me is the bodily experience when in script. So acting out of those archaic ways of thinking, feeling, and also when not in script. So when I feel triggered into not acting out of an accounting space and the positive modes is almost feeling here around my shoulders. Sometimes it feels like there's a lot of pressure in my head and I overthink things. And then I can realize what's happening. And it's quite difficult still to have those bodily experiences and then at the same time be present.
Yes.
Because it's almost like a tug of war. You're feeling invited into acting out of the negative modes, but being able to observe that and still work at making decisions from the here and now.
Yeah. I think that's really important what you just shared, Alex, about the bodily experiences, because being able to experience them is already part of accounting, and noticing how do you feel it in your body when you're being triggered or just before you are triggered into acting in an ineffective way. Because if you can stay with feeling it, then you can also, you know what it usually takes you to, and you can also decide to do something else. But if you shut off the feeling, then you're not even able to do that.
Yeah, and for a long time, that's what I was quite skilled at, was shutting off the feeling. So, I mean, that actually makes it even harder if you're not aware that you're being triggered, because you don't feel, bodily sensations or emotional sensations. It can become just a cognitive exercise, but that's not really the whole picture.
Yeah, exactly. Pooja, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah. In fact, connecting from where Alex mentioned about shutting, experience, a bodily experience, what I was left with thought was that what you mentioned as a question, do I or others benefit? So something that helped me add on to what Alex mentioned about if one is not closing the chapter of, for example, not being okay, experiencing the feeling. Once one is able to get in touch with that, then probably even asking this whole question about am I or the others benefiting, that kind of really helped me sum up, it's much easier for me to then quickly be able to see where I am. Instead of again going into the thinking mode as to where am I or what's happening. Rather than getting there, it's about what's happening, and it just helps me be in that space.
Yes, exactly. Lovely. That it takes you back into the okay space. So as we're looking at these effective and ineffective modes, last week we did that little exercise where you looked at a tricky situation that you handled really well, in which you could, I guess, see how you're using the effective modes. Because when you're handling situations well, that's what you're doing. You're behaving effectively. And now my question is, on a bad day or when you're really feeling stressed out, what do you think might trigger you into using any of the less effective modes, the purple modes where you haven't gone through a counting process? And just share what comes up spontaneously. Yeah, no particular order.
One of my ones that I notice regularly is if I'm holding an expectation and things aren't meeting the expectation. Mm-hmm. And what I've been trying to work with, I'm working with, is noticing when I've got some like unconscious expectations. Mm-hmm. So a simple example was I would often notice that I'd be excited to cook a meal, and then when I get to serving the meal, I'm irritated. And what I realized is that I had like the perfect image in my mind about what this meal needs to look like at the end of it, and it doesn't look like a MasterChef meal. Okay. So therefore it's crap. But actually, when I realized that, it was helpful to go, okay, I've got this underlying expectation, so it's triggering me to go into an ineffective mode, which is actually just making the actual important time, sitting down and enjoying a meal with special people, not enjoyable.
Yeah. So you've also already taken that first step. You've noticed it, and you're busy with it cognitively. How do you feel that irritation? You said you look at the meal and you feel irritated. Where do you feel that?
I get like this tense feeling going straight up my back into my head.
Okay.
And then I overdo things. Again, I suppose it's the seriously into driver behavior. So take it out on myself, take it out on my partner, my mom, if I'm having whoever's having the misfortune of sharing the meal with me at that time.
Okay. So that first indication of you're triggered is that sensation that you feel going up your back, and then things happen, because that's usually the beginning of some sort of automatic reaction.
Yeah. So I feel that it's like I get that tension up my back, so then I become kind of like parrot almost, and then it's like, okay, now then certain decorums have to be observed.
Okay.
Which is just not pleasant. So whereas what I'm enjoying now is noticing it and then like sort of letting it go, and then just being able to enjoy the meal and not be further triggered by other things.
Yes, exactly, because it sounds like you've made this wonderful meal, but once the automatic process is set in motion, no one really benefits. You don't enjoy it. The others probably don't enjoy the meal or your company then either.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's just this tick, tick, tick. I sometimes have a picture of dominoes in my mind, when you've all stood them up nicely, and then the first one falls and it hits all the others and they go tick, 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 and they're all falling down. It's like, oh. So that bodily sensation that you have, or that we all have when we're triggered into an ineffective or less effective mode, is sometimes that's where we can catch it. The quicker we catch that, we know where it starts, then we can sort of try and be quick at catching the next domino so that the rest don't need to fall and they can stay standing. So maybe we just have step 1, 2, 3, but it doesn't have to go further. And you can almost play with that like a game of seeing, okay, where does it start? Is it the tingling in the back? Is it the rigidity through the body? Whatever it is for any one of us, we can pick it up and we know, oh gosh, that's the film that usually follows. And you try and stop it at, well, as early a position as possible. Does that make sense?
The image that's coming to mind is that one that's going around about social distancing with the matches and how they pull the match away and then suddenly it can't, you know?
Yes.
It's the same type of thing as the dominoes, but the matches.
That's true. That's true. It's exactly the same concept. Yeah. Okay.
So I'm contemplating how, so when I'm triggered, I move into parent, but the unhelpful side of it.
So the dominating mode responses.
Yeah.
So dominating and marshmallowing, or
so I was thinking about like how fear motivates me. So when I'm feeling fearful, I go into dominating. I want to control everything. I want to be in charge of everything. When somebody else is experiencing fear, I can be invited to go into marshmallowing. I want to look after them. I want to make sure that they're okay and protect them and shield them from what they're feeling. So for me, I find fear to be quite a strong invitation to slip out of that positive, helpful state.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about the child, and I keep confusing the words. The relating to others and the doing my own thing, or cooperative, compliant. And I'm trying to think about, well, when do I slip into being immature? And I think it's when I get overwhelmed. So the word that comes up in that area is overwhelmed. I either get so overwhelmed emotionally that I just start having a tantrum like a child, so that immature type of thing, or it's that compliant / resistant mode where I'm like, just tell me what to do. Like, for example, our government enforcing a lockdown brings me such relief, because now I don't have to make a decision about what's okay and what's not okay. Just tell me what to do. And it helps me with my overwhelm. So I'm like, cool, I'm happy to be compliant for now.
Yes.
But then, like, not being able to walk my dog triggers my rebelliousness, that resistance. And now I'm like, well, surely I can just cross the road and let him sniff a tree. Who's going to stop me? You know? And then I start. So I'm not sure where that really fits in with the overwhelm, but I think for me, those two, the fear and the overwhelm, kind of trigger me into stepping outside of being okay.
Thanks, Kirsty. I think those are really good examples. And what you brought up about the fear or anxiety is something that is very, very common. I see that with a lot of clients, and of course also in myself, working with the functional fluency model. You can go quite deeply into each of those different modes and how they're described. And for a lot of people, anxiety is what triggers all of the other purple mode responses, we call them. So, and anxiety is also something that sits in the compliant resistant mode. One of the descriptors for that mode is anxiety. And if scores on that are high, it's often where it starts for people. So where not being able to take into account what is really happening starts, because fear or anxiety is so uncomfortable that we want to get away from it as quickly as possible. We don't want to feel it. We don't want to see it. And we want to feel stronger. So a very typical reaction that I've seen and also felt is going straight into dominating, because it helps people feel strong. If I can dominate someone else, I tell them what to do, it takes me away from my own feeling frightened. And I don't have to go through that. And from that, it can go into the marshmallowing and into the immature and also into the, yes, just tell me what to do, then I don't have to think anymore. So it's often where it starts for a lot of people. Of course, different people have their different trigger points, but anxiety is definitely a big one for keeping us out of accounting behavior. And the other thing that you mentioned about feeling safe when someone, a government, an authority figure tells you what to do is also something I think that we all need as human beings. And it sounded like for you at the moment, it's actually not just about complying, because you've gone through a whole rational process of thinking about what is necessary and what is responsible and what makes sense. So you have chosen your response, And of course, there's still a bit of uncertainty around it. So this has given you support, which you needed. So it's like the government is behaving in a nurturing and structuring way. We're being given the structure and our needs are being catered to, if you see it that way. And that makes you feel safer and you're able to cooperate.
Interesting. So it's not that I'm just complying without thinking about it.
You're not just complying. So the resisting part, I started hearing when you were thinking, but I'm not allowed to walk my dog, but I'm going to anyway, What someone did yesterday in a TV interview that I also saw with our health minister, it's interesting, we've all been looking at our health minister, someone asked about walking the dogs. And he said it is absolutely fine for people to take their dogs out and to take a quick walk up and down to get some fresh air, as long as you are not meeting with other people and not doing it as a community activity or something. These are things that will have to happen and that people can do. If you're going for a jog around the block on your own, that is also fine. Which is, also then reassuring. What I can't do is I can't go and exercise my horses because I would be going to someone else's place where potentially I could meet someone else and all of that. So I've had to deal with that, and then also look at, okay, how do I best cooperate? And I've also been doing quite a bit of accounting on that to look at what's being compliant resistant, what's being cooperative. And a lot of this is happening in our heads, and we just need to be careful not to get stuck in our heads, but to really also, stay in tune with the feeling and with those bodily reactions that can actually tell us whether we are reacting or responding.
Have you ever linked this to the nervous system and that fight or flight or freeze response and where you typically go? Because I listened in on a webinar last night about the vagus nerve, and they were talking about the nervous system and its responses. And it's just the way she described our behavior and our bodily sensations when we go into those different modes. It's just, it's sitting quite nicely on top of this.
Yeah, it does. And I think it's very linked. So I think Susanna in her research on this and coming up with the model didn't explicitly look at the nervous system, but I see that a lot of TIF providers and people using the functional fluency model in their work link it quite strongly. My colleague Leona, who's in the Caribbean and works there, also does a lot of linking with the nervous system, and Leeuwen in Holland also, really focusing on what is happening in the body, what are we feeling, in order to get those indications for when are we using which behaviors, and also for helping us shift out of the ineffective behaviors. I think an important one there is to also notice which are the effective behaviors that we are especially good at. Because if we know that there's something that we do very well and that feels quite natural and that feels good, that can also be helpful when we want to shift out of the ineffective. What would come up for you there? What, anyone who'd like to share? Do you have a strong sense of which effective behaviors you're really good at?
I have one, but I would like your help in figuring out where it comes from in accounting.
Okay.
It's seeing things from a meta perspective.
Okay. So seeing things from a meta perspective, so almost as if you were outside, you were you're overlooking something. Is it that?
Seeing multiple perspectives.
Okay. I think that's definitely linked with accounting.
I'm thinking evaluation.
It's the evaluative part of accounting. It's being evaluative, rational, being able to link those dots as well. I would say that's accounting. But it's not all of accounting. And that's the interesting part. It's an important part of accounting. And the other part of accounting is the being grounded and being able to feel. Because the other part can be very head, unbalanced in terms of it's just head and not linked with the feeling part. But it sounds to me from what you've said that you've been integrating the both of them, and maybe accounting is really your strong point.
It's interesting that there can also be too much accounting, and that's certainly where I can get stuck sometimes. It's too much in a headspace.
Okay, yeah. So, but if you, and accounting is something that you feel quite comfortable in because you know you're good at, right? How can that help you when you are feeling triggered to start using ineffective behavior?
Start using ineffective behavior.
Ineffective, but if you're being triggered into the ineffective, how can your ability to do accounting well help you there? How can you use that?
Well, I think being aware of what's happening within myself, so different body sensations, patterns of thinking, noticing the markers that I've learned about myself of what happens when I'm triggered into ineffective modes of behavior. That comes in useful.
Yeah.
So it's like being an observer of self.
Yeah, exactly. So that you don't get so sucked in, you can really take that step out and use your meta perspective and then step back in again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think for each of us, the triggers are different and also our strengths are different. And we need to know both in order to really train ourselves in becoming more and more functionally fluent and more effective. And sometimes it sounds like that's a lot of hard work and it's a lot of just the rational stuff and we need to be writing things down all the time. And for some people, it may be about writing things down and journaling and doing a lot of head work. For other people, it's really more about getting into the meditative space and getting more in touch with the body sensations and feeling and doing some body work. So we each have to sort of find our way and see what fits with our strengths and our areas that we want to improve to then make a plan for ourselves. And that's why also when we do TIFF profiles for ourselves or for clients, it's not about comparing people's profiles with each other or for looking at this is the perfect functional fluency profile that we all need to have. Everyone is different. So those profiles are always about giving people a snapshot of their own behavior at a particular point in time so that they can work on their development plan for themselves and then take the steps that will be most useful and beneficial for them and the people in their environment. So that's basically what this is all about. This was supposed to be an introduction and I'm aware of the time that we're nearing the end. So I've tried to round it up here. I would love to carry on just chatting with you all for hours. And I'd love it if we stay in touch around this. And yeah, please say now if you've got any questions. And if it's any longer question, then we can also continue the conversation at a later point or via email.
I have a bigger question. What can people do if they have more interest in the functional fluency model and how to apply it?
Get in touch with me. And I am planning to do a TIFF training. It was planned for end of April, but that's not going to be happening now because we're not doing face-to-face stuff. But I'm busy working with some colleagues on a TIFF training that we can offer online, and it probably won't be ready by end of April, but a little bit later in the year, so that we can actually do a training for providers if you want to use it with your clients. If you want to go deeper for yourself, I would suggest doing your own TIFF profile and going through it with me or another provider to really look at, well, where are your strengths in the effective modes? Where are perhaps your weaknesses? Where do you get triggered into the ineffective modes, so that you can continue working with that?
And how do people get hold of you, Layo?
My email address, should I add that onto the presentation that I've got and then send it round? Email address and phone number.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay, I'll do that.
And your website?
And website, I'll put that on as well.
Okay, good.
Okay. Any other questions or comments now? Thank you, Alex, for that.
Just thank you, Layo. It was really interesting. And yeah, good to stimulate the thinking and the self-awareness, especially while we're sitting at home. Lots of time to do these things. So thank you very much.
Exactly. Pleasure.
Layo, I just had one question. When you say about the strengths, right? So does it mean to say that an individual would have a few dominant strengths, or is it more like depending on the circumstance, the strengths would vary?
They would vary depending on circumstances, and at the same time, you would probably have dominant strengths through what you've experienced in your life so far. So how you grew up, and what sort of work you do. You may tend to be very good at nurturing, looking after people, or you may be very good at structuring. A lot of people who are in leadership roles or managers sort of focus on the structuring part. Different people focus on different parts. The difference is, though, that this is not, it's not a personality profiling tool that says, okay, this is your personality, this is your strength always. It really depends on what you've experienced and what you're faced with right now that you'll be particularly strong at. So your strengths can actually also shift over time.
Okay. So primarily, when you say about the profiling, what is the next thing suggested for, like, what is generally the way it's taken forward? Like, for instance, you mentioned about an individual profiling, or when it's taken to organizations, the profiling is done. Generally, what is the course of action post that? What can one expect out of this profiling? If I'm not using the right term, not the profiling, but yeah,
it is a profile that one gets. So I guess one can call it profiling. It's a good place to start having a discussion with people about their behavior and when they're effective and ineffective, especially for people who haven't done a lot of this reflective work before. It gives them a nice structure to work with. And that can then lead into longer term coaching processes. For some people, it's a once-off because they just want to find out a bit more about themselves. For others, it leads into a coaching process for individuals. In organizations, what I sometimes do is I do individual TIFF profiles for various team members, and then they would all go through their own individual process with the feedback session, which normally takes about 2 hours. And then I can take that back into the team setting, because we can aggregate their different individual profiles into a team profile, and they can look at what does the behavioral profile of their team look like. And without comparing each other's individual profiles, they can look at which part of their team profile is taking them towards their goals as a team, and which parts of that profile are taking them away from their goals. And they can each reflect on, what am I contributing to the success or not of my team, of my organization, and what kind of commitments do I want to make to do this, to continue doing this, or to do this differently. So it's a very good platform always for reflection and discussion for individuals and for teams as well.
As I'm so sorry, but I have to run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are at the end of the time. Thank you, Kirsty.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. So thanks so much. Nice to see you all, and hope to connect again soon.
Okay, stay well.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Bye. So I think that the rest of us can still, finish ending off here. Andrew, did you want to say something?
Thanks. I've really enjoyed dipping back into functional fluency. Again, always finding new insights about myself and how I relate to the world. So really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everyone. And really stay in touch. Email me questions if you've got them. And I'll keep you posted around what sort of workshops or trainings will still be offered online this year. And we'll take it from there.
No, thanks so much. It was very informative. And I learned a lot about myself. And I hope that people follow through and do the training and learn more about functional fluency and TIFF.
Yeah, I hope so too. Thank you, Alex. Oh, and one question from my side before we stop. We recorded this whole thing. I'm aware that a lot of the second part